Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. We've made it through another fancy Friday. If you're tuning in here live on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Cornell and Monish and Wade and Abdullah and Sherville, Cody, Ayla, Gareth, Lorena, and Myra. Now, I don't see the video playing on Behance just yet, but hopefully that will start. Let me just make sure. Looks like it's okay over here on YouTube. Yeah, hold on. Give me one second. I just want to make sure that we're all good. Doesn't look like we're good yet. All right, give me a second. I promise this will probably start at some point. Or maybe it won't. I don't know. Okay, give me a second. If anyone sees it in the chat, let me know. I know on YouTube, on a certain stream, it works. But on Behance, I don't see anything. And no one in the chat is saying anything. Which tells me, probably not working. Okay, give me a second. I'm gonna log in here and figure something out. All right, well, while we're doing that, if anyone is on the specific stream on YouTube that is working, hello, hope you're all well over there. And I am going to troubleshoot this. Having some technical difficulties. Give us a second. Yeah, so Wade is saying it's all good on YouTube, but it's not working on Behance. So hi, Wade. Great to see you on YouTube. No one else. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be connecting over to the Behance stream, which is interesting because it looks like it's all set up properly. Unless the wrong embed code was put in there for the other stream. Oh, you know what it was? Actually, where does this go? Yep, it's the wrong one. Okay. Okay, give me a second. I think we figured it out. It's just me and Wade talking to each other right now, trying to figure out what's going on in the stream. It's all good. All good. All right, so we figured out the problem. We're just trying to figure out now what the solution is. And I'm talking to the team now, and yeah. Always fun with technical difficulties. There's a lot of people waiting in the chat, but no stream on Behance right now. I wish I can talk to everyone in the chat, but I cannot. Well, this is fun. So for the few people who are on YouTube on this specific stream, how are y'all doing? Hopefully we can get this sort. Oh, look, wait. Hold on, I think we might be good. I see me, I just popped up somewhere. Okay, aha. All right, there I am. Hello. Should we do this whole shindig again? Should we like do the intro and all that fun stuff? Because you're all just seeing me staring at my screen. We're gonna run the intro again, and I will be right back. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe, and I hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. And I know some people in chat have been here for a while. We've been dealing with some technical difficulties, and hopefully we're all good to go. Afternoon. Yes, it looks like the audio is fine. If you are experiencing any issues, do a quick refresh and we should be good to go. So, we're gonna get going with Masterclass number, what Masterclass is this? 57. But a big thank you to the team behind the scenes who very quickly figured out all the technical difficulties. Senna and Paco, thank you for dealing with all of this stuff. So, big hello to my chat now flipped over to the other side because I refreshed the thing. So, we've got Umacorn and Sherville and Tim and Cheryl and Kita and Lorena, Glenn and Leslie, Fergie, Wade, Aubrey. Great to see everyone. I did see in the last chat before everything refreshed, Leslie posted something to the extent, I wish I can see it, but she posted something that said something like, does anyone else watch these streams even though they're way beyond her capabilities? Something to that extent. And I think that's wonderful. One, because hopefully they're a little bit entertaining, but two, they're going to inspire you, I hope, at least. And one day, if you just, keep watching, keep practicing, keep having fun when you're designing, you're absolutely going to get to that level where you'll be able to create some of this stuff. And I truly believe that even some of the stuff that I create on these masterclasses, it may seem advanced, but I guarantee you, you can get to that level. So keep working on it, all of you, Leslie and Reza and Kevin and Anita. I believe Anita's from Toronto, and Lorena. Everyone, keep working at it. All right, so we're gonna hop over to my screen and we are going to get going with Masterclass number 57. Before I do that, very quickly, some of you were asking about the weather icon that I created that I uploaded to Dribbble. This little guy right over here, I'm working on some weather widgets for some projects that may come in handy at some point in the future. And some of you were asking about this, so I took to YouTube. And I have a bunch of new videos. One of them is how to create that icon in specific. I also have a few videos on toggle states and outline stroke and all that fun stuff, some of the newer features in XD. But that's not what today is all about. Today, we are going to be revisiting, oh, now I can't see my chat. All right, hold it. All my setup is all over the place. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna run my fancy little script so I can, so I can switch over the chat over to the left side of my screen. That way I can see all you fancy people right beside my camera. All right, so we are good to go. We're gonna be revisiting the Bestla redesign that we started, I believe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. And if you remember that stream, if you didn't, definitely go back and watch that. Cornell saying, had no idea you're still posting videos on YouTube. I am. I try to aim for at least one a week. Of course, if we have new features, new updates, and all that fun stuff, might be a little bit more. But yeah, still posting there. So if you remember that stream from a few weeks ago, I discovered this app that allows you to do more with your Tesla, right? And this could apply to any, this one in particular is a Tesla application, but we can design this for basically any car, a Prius, for example. So I stumbled across this app, started to use it a little bit, and the functionality is wonderful, but the design could use a little bit of polish. So what I decided to do, because I know that the developer is not necessarily a designer, it's a one-person team, decided to try to give it a shot and redesign it a little bit, work on the UI and UX, and we tackled a lot in that first stream, but today we're going to tackle even more. So this is the existing application as it is today. I discussed a lot of the user experience, opportunities. That's the word. I don't want to use issues because they're more opportunities. They're things to improve. So I discussed a lot of that during that stream. And today we're going to move on and continue that process. So here's where we left off. We started building out this login screen, and a lot of this was very intentional. The fact that in the current design, if I have it here, so the login screen straight up has, text fields where you can enter your information in. I deliberately switched it over to start with buttons, only because I really want users to know what they're getting into, right? Here, it was very, very confusing to me the first time I opened the app. I didn't know that I had to put in my login credentials for my Bestla account. So, just adding that extra step, even though sometimes you want to condense things into one screen and one step, sometimes to better the user experience, you have to expand it a little bit and add an extra step. And I really feel that this screen not only helps tell the user what this application is a little bit, but it also, straight up says you're going to log in with Bestla, or you can use your Bestla API token. Or one feature that I thought was really cool about this app is you can demo the experience without logging in. And then you go to this login screen, and we designed some text fields using components. We have a login button at the bottom. It might be a little bit chunky down here, but we can definitely work on that. And then I streamlined this section here. And in today's Masterclass, what I want to focus on is the next screen. So after you log in with your account, if you're a first-time user, you're going to select a vehicle. And I felt that this particular section here, there's a lot of opportunity to really, brighten it up a little bit, add some pictures of cars, if developers are allowed to bring in pictures of Teslas and things like that. I don't know all those rules and what Bestla allows, but I just feel there's some polish that can be done for this particular screen. So what we are going to do is we're going to start that process. So I'm going to grab this artboard that we've been working on, and I'm going to duplicate it, Command and Control D. And Kita is asking, how do you know when to add the extra step? Is it a feeling, or will you just know? It's a little bit of both. And I think a lot of times user research plays big into that. If you're a designer or a developer and you get the app into the hands of users and they are a little bit confused on that first step, maybe that's a sign that you might want to revisit, maybe add a different one, or just restructure that first step. But to me, it was kind of just a feeling. It really depends. But in general, you want fewer steps as possible, but if it's confusing and if it's a very specific workflow, you might want to go one or two more steps. So this one is over here is going to be the vehicle. It's a strange word, right? What is the H doing there? I know some people say vehicle, but why is there an H there? I don't know. They probably used to say vehicle. It's a strange word. Anyways. All right. So what we also did is we used these illustrations at the top to help with the onboarding. One of the big benefits of this application is the ability to perform quick actions and use Siri to activate various functionalities of your car. So as you go through this workflow, this flow, these speech bubbles at the top, they change to show you all the different things you can say to your app or press in the app, and it'll perform on your car. So what we're going to do to start is we're going to dive in here, and let's do something like find maybe charger. And this would be a supercharger. The word supercharger probably wouldn't fit in here without making that text a little bit too small. So we're going to stick with that. And maybe here might want to do close the trunk. All right. Perfect. All right, so now that we have that looking pretty good, doesn't look like we have any duplicates. Very good. So it looks like the Brits say vehicle. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. Sure. Great. All right, so we're going to kind of continue with this style for this particular screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive in here, and we're going to change this to say something like, you're in, let's select your vehicle. And we do have this red highlight that we've been using on our, Saddam is saying his first live masterclass. Welcome, Saddam. Thank you for joining me. So we've been using this red highlight to emphasize specific words. We've also been bolding specific words as well. So I'm going to dive in here. I'm going to bump this up to heavy. This I'm going to bring down to lowercase, and then I'm going to grab that highlight, shift it on over a little bit, and then bring that out a touch so it highlights the word vehicle. There we go. Perfect. All right. So now down here, we don't need these text fields. We don't need any of this lovely stuff. So I'm going to delete all of it. But right in this area here, we want to showcase some of the vehicles that this user might have. Is this centered? It doesn't look centered. Now it's centered. Are these centered? Oh, they were not centered. Nobody told me they weren't centered. Bad, Howard. All right, now they're centered. Now I feel much better. Everything is good in the world. Aliens might be revealed today by the government. Everything's great. All right, so we want to start off by creating these, almost buttons. I mean, I guess they will be buttons, but visual buttons, so that people can see exactly what car it is. Because some people, I wish I had that problem, but some people have like 4 Teslas. Right? And some of them might be the same color. Maybe some of them are named the same, Tesla 1, 2, 3, 4. So having a visual representation of that car might help a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my good old rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw out a box across this artboard. We're going to leave a little bit of padding on the side. That might be a little bit too much padding, and I think I don't have guides on this artboard. All right, so let's drag out some guides. Let's go maybe 24. Is that going to be too squishy on the side? Let's try 32. Right about there, and also 32 on this side as well. That way we can just snap it to the side there, and we're good to go. All right, perfect. Do you create something like typography scale when first designing? So it depends. Most of the designs that I create are for streams like this, so I don't have too much time to dive deep into type and things like that, but we did in the first stream for this application. We did start exploring some typefaces, but we didn't go too deep into header copy, body copy, buttons, and that sort of thing. But as I am building, I do tend to save that stuff in my document assets. But of course, if I was designing for an actual client, that process would probably change and get a little bit deeper than what I do on these streams. All right. Now we do have, in some cases, a little bit of a curvy feel to this application. Some areas are nice and sharp, but I'm going to go ahead and round out the corners a little bit. Let's try 16 pixels. Looks pretty good. And we may not need a border. We might get to the border later. But in the background, we might want the background color to match the actual color of the cars. So if I hop over to Finder just for a quick second, I do have a bunch of cars here. And these are transparent. It took me forever to find the transparent versions of these cars. And so we're going to be dragging those in a second. But we're going to start with the blue one. So, it has a little bit of dark blue, a little bit of light blue. So what we're going to do for this particular container is under fill, we're going to switch this over to linear gradient. And maybe the top color will be more on the darker side, and then the bottom color will be a little bit lighter. And a lot of this is trial and error as you start adding new elements, text and other images on top of this container. You might realize maybe the colors aren't working and you might want to dial them back, bring some saturation out, or maybe brighten them or darken them. So, definitely take that in mind, that you'll probably have to change things. It's almost never going to be the case where you set a color and you're good to go, right? All right, so we've got that, and maybe we're going to add a bit of a border back. Let's set it at pure white and then just drop the opacity quite a bit, just so we have, let's try 10%, just so we have a very simple border going around this. It separates it from the background a little bit, and we can also, if we want to, add a bit of a shadow. I talk about shadows a lot. Keep them simple. The background has a little bit of blue in it, so we might want to introduce a touch of blue, very little, because it's a very dark blue. So keep it subtle, and we're going to bump it down on the Y. Maybe we're going to blur it quite a bit, 16 possibly. Maybe increase the opacity a touch. So keep your shadows nice and simple. What would 32 look like? No, let's go back to 16. We'll see how that looks. Once we start adding the other cars, the shadow might conflict a little bit, so we'll see. All right, I would also like to make a pothole tracker app. That's a very good idea. I like that. Why do your character styles look like big cards? Oh, so David, so inside of your document assets, right up here at the top, you can toggle between list view, which is probably what you see by default, just like this, and grid view. I prefer grid view, makes them a little bit larger, and of course, if you make this panel larger as well, they rearrange really nicely. It just looks nicer. All right. So we've got that looking pretty good. Now on top of this, we want to start adding some additional elements. We want to add a quick title of what car this is. Maybe it has a name, for example. You can name your cars, and the image. So I'm going to duplicate this shape just so I have a similar shape in place. We don't need the border, we don't need the shadow, we don't need any of that stuff. And the fill right now is set to gradient, but once we actually drag an image in, it's going to replace that. So I'm going to hop over to Finder, I'm going to grab that image, and boop. Wait, where's the boop? There it is. Boop. All right. Now, we could leave it like this. It doesn't look too bad, but I want to get a little bit stylistic with it, a little bit fancy, maybe blend it in a touch. So there are a few things we're going to do. One, we're going to double click on this image to access its mask. And I might want to bring it up a little bit. There you go. Maybe bring it down. Move it over. And if anyone is wondering, I absolutely make these weird noises when I'm designing by myself. I'm sure we all do, right? Don't tell me you don't. You do. All right. So that looks okay. Not too bad, but if you want to blend it in a little bit, you can experiment with some blend mode. So overlay, not bad. Soft light, it's a little bit much. Hard light, okay. That could work. So if you take a look at hard light versus normal, it just blends it in just a little bit with that background. And of course, as we change that gradient in the background, if we decided to maybe darken that top color, you're going to notice that the car, because it's somewhat transparent now, is also changing, right? There we go. That's looking pretty good. And don't ask me to explain exactly how blend modes work. A lot of mathematical equations involved. They do things to your layers. Some of them affect them lightly. Some of them affect them darkly. Don't know if that's words, but you know what? We're going to run with it. All right. And then the final thing we're going to add is the name of the car and maybe the model of the car as well. So this one, we're going to grab our text, and this might be something like gas. I saw this on a license plate of a Tesla. It was just gas LOL, which I thought was hilarious. Now we are using Avenir Next for most of our text layers. So I'm going to start with that. This one's probably way too large. Let's try something like 14. Bold might be a bit too much. We might want to drop, I don't know, maybe bold's okay. Let's go ahead and preview this. Is this project for Elon Musk? It is not. When I do projects like this, I typically don't really do them for very large companies. They have money, they have resources to make their own apps. The Tesla app is okay, could use some work, but I don't care about that. This one in particular is for, if anyone's just joining, it's for this app here. It's called Bestla. Very clever, right? And it's made by a one-person developer. They're not a designer, I don't believe, so I figured maybe I can help them out a little bit by providing some design suggestions, because it is a great app, it just needs a little bit of polish. So I'd rather focus my time on helping single developers who might need some design help that have a really good app. They're not going to help Tesla. I like Tesla, I own a Tesla, but they can do their own thing. All right, and then beside here, we may want to put the model. So I'm going to duplicate this text layer over, and we'll do something like model Y. Now this might be secondary information, right? So we could probably drop this to something like medium or even regular. The size, I don't know, you want to drop the size? Maybe not, it could work. And then possibly just to blend it in a little bit, we can experiment with maybe overlay. That doesn't look too bad. Or soft light, subtle. Not bad. All right, we're going to leave it at that. We're going to see how that looks. Maybe I'll drop these a little bit more. Now, one thing I really want to stress is, here it's looking pretty good, right? We have our car name on the left and we have the model. But on the next car that we're going to create down here in a second, the name of the car might be a little bit longer than this one. So if we were to change this to, let's say, my Tesla. It's a terrible name for a car, but right? You're going to notice that that Model Y text layer stays exactly where we have it. So to work around that, we want to utilize stacking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these layers. I'm going to pop them into a group. Command and Control G, or you can right click and group. And this will be called car info. And what we want to do now is we want to turn on a stack within the properties inspector right over here. And it's going to automatically look at the layers inside this stack and determine the orientation. So it's noticing that the two layers in this case, are moving left to right. So it determined that it is a horizontal stack and they're spaced 6 pixels from each other. So now what we can do, if we do decide to change that name, hi, right? It automatically moves, which is wonderful. And you're going to see that in action in just a moment. So all of this is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and select all the information that makes up this card. I'm going to group it and call this, I'll just call this gas LOL. And now we can move on to our next one. So I'm going to duplicate this down, or we can also use another stack for this. So if I group this, I'm going to call this vehicles, and I can turn a stack on. Now, what you're going to notice is it defined it as a horizontal stack again. It's not what we want in this case. We want a vertical stack. And it's doing this because there's only technically one group inside of this larger group. So when it looks inside, it only sees one, so it just defaults to horizontal. If there were multiple going down already, then it would default to vertical. But I'm going to switch it over to vertical, and now I can dive in here and boop, duplicate. And now we have another. Of course, I can duplicate again, but we'll get to that in a second. So this one here, we're going to make a few changes to switch up this car. I'm going to dive in here, and this one might be Sparky. And maybe this might be a Model 3 instead. Now, we might want maybe one of the white Model 3s or the silver Model 3s. So we're going to make a few changes to the styling just to visually differentiate it from this one at the top. So I'm going to select that background layer. And by the way, I should point out, little pro tip, if you have situations like this, I'm going to rename this for a second. If you have a situation like this where you have two layers on top of each other that are exactly the same size. You have this rectangle in the background, which I should probably rename to something a little bit better. And this one over here is car image. The rectangles are identical, right? So if you wanted to select that background, you're going to automatically select the car. Don't want to do that. So if you hold, you can of course select the layers inside of your layers panel, but if you want to very quickly do it, just hold down your command key on the Mac or control key on Windows and click. It's going to dive past that layer that's currently selected and select the one behind it. And if you continue using the command key and clicking, it'll just keep going back and back and back and back and back, as long as there are layers back there. Howard said, please, if you are real, Elon must send me a message on Twitter. Oh, okay, yes, I do remember that, yes. All right, and someone, why don't you use a repeat grid? You can absolutely use a repeat grid in this one, but because I'm going to be changing the color of the background, which I should probably do now while I'm talking, because I'm going to be changing the color of the background, text layers are going to be moving, the image is going to be changing, and I might want to rearrange some of these layers a little bit later on. Stacking, just, it's just a little bit more flexible in that sense. So we're going to make maybe a gray background up here, and maybe at the bottom will be nice and light in this area there. And then for this image here, I'm going to hop over to Finder one more time. And I do have, I think this one here is a white Model 3, and bloop, perfect. Now, just like I did with the other one, I might want to scale this up a touch and just try to match it a little bit better to the car at the top. There we go. Now, what you might want to experiment with, because, it's looking a little bit blown out here is you may want to experiment with the different blend modes in this case. So that's definitely not going to work. Soft light, probably not going to work. Multiply, it's going to darken it a little bit, so might not work. So maybe in this case, we might want to actually maybe drop this a little bit, maybe drop this a touch. There we go. Now we can see that car a little bit better. But one thing we can't really see really well are the text layers. We have these white text layers against a grayish white background, which makes it a little bit difficult to see. So in this case, we may want to just switch this up a little bit and maybe go gray, just so we improve accessibility a little bit. Sometimes developers need to download a single image from an artboard. Can they download from the share link? So yes, so if developers need files and you're working with developers, what you'll want to do is, let's say you'll want developers to download this particular car image. What you'll want to do is press this button right over here, mark for export. The same button is available down at the very bottom of your properties inspector. But the important thing is when you are sharing your work, you'll want to make sure to share for development. That way, those assets are provided, because when you click on this, you'll be able to include all the marked assets that your developers will need. They can download all of them at once, or they can download individual assets, but you have to make sure to share for development. If you just share for, design review, then those assets are not provided to them. All right. So that one's looking pretty good. There's good old Sparky, and I'm going to duplicate one more time. And let me duplicate this one up here, because we're going to be using the white text again. And this one might be called Apollo. This might be also a Model Y. And let's grab maybe this gray one. Boop. Bring it on up. Move it over. And of course, if I was being very particular, I would definitely use my guides to make sure that the front of the cars all line up. Currently they don't. Maybe that could be by design, right? Maybe the top one possibly could be over this way. Maybe this one could be a little bit here, and then this one. So it kind of goes in this weird little, I don't know. Yeah, have fun with it, right? And then finally, the background, because we're dealing with a gray car, I'm going to change the background to a nice gray color. So let's go for a darker gray up here at the top, and then we'll do a lighter gray down at the bottom. There we go. All right. Perfect. So our car selection screen is looking pretty good. I might want to move this up a little bit. Maybe space these out a touch, and because I'm using stacks, I can just dive in here to the properties inspector and bump these up a little bit. 12 looks okay. I think that could work. And there we go. So let's go ahead and preview this quickly. Beautiful. Now, of course, if you did have additional cars in this list, there are a few ways that we can handle this, right? And this is where you have to really start thinking about things from a user experience point of view. Do you want to enable scrolling? So let's just duplicate a few, for example, right? So we have, 2 more white ones, 2 more blue ones. We could enable scrolling. We could grab this group and turn a scroll group on in the properties inspector and do something like this, right? Where's that home indicator? Where are you, home indicator? There it is. Boop. All right, so you can enable scrolling and you can do something like that. Not too bad, right? But you need to make sure that users know that there are more cars down there. You can also potentially, if they have a lot of cars, do like a 2x2, right? So you have 2 cars, one here, and then you have another row of 2 and 2. A lot of it depends. I can't imagine most people will have more than 3 Teslas on their account. It's possible, but you know what? Gotta talk to your users, right? All right, so this screen's looking pretty good, pretty happy with it. Might make a few minor tweaks, but for the most part, it's looking pretty good. So what we want to do now is move on to our next screen, which is going to be the first screen inside of the application. Now, going back to the current application that's available, this is the home screen essentially, right? It's called Data. And when I first landed on the screen, to me, it wasn't really what I was looking for. knowing that this application really benefits with quick actions and, you know, being able to see bits and pieces of your car right away, that's kind of what I want to focus on. I personally don't really care about the charts and all that stuff. Some might, which is great. And again, that goes back to talking with your users, seeing what your users want in an application like this. Maybe they actually want a chart. Maybe I'm completely wrong. It's very possible I'm wrong a lot. So, you know, we want to kind of revisit this. We also want to, you know, polish up the navigation bar at the bottom a little bit so people know exactly what these icons are. So let's go ahead and I'm going to duplicate. And on this screen, we probably don't want most of this information. Might want to keep the background. And you're going to see what we're going to do with that in a moment. I'm actually going to bring it on up. And maybe I'll round out the corners up at the top. So I'm just dragging those handles inwards. Let's go for something like 24. We'll start with that. We might want to go to 32. Let's see. Maybe. 32 could work. But you're going to notice, because I just grabbed one of those handles and brought that in, it also rounded out the corners at the bottom. So in that case, I can either switch this over in the Properties Inspector and manually enter those values in, or I can hold down my Alt or Option key and view, drag that corner back in and view, drag that one back in. So now I only have the corners at the top looking pretty good. All right. Now, another thing I might want to add at the top of this screen is another visual indicator as to which car was selected. So let's say, for example, that maybe the Apollo car was selected. Riza is saying, talk more about share and prototype more in Masterclasses. I definitely talk about prototyping a lot in these Masterclasses. Sharing I don't talk about too much, only because it usually comes at the very end of a project, which I'm usually starting at the beginning, but I'll definitely keep that in mind. All right, what kind of Tesla do you have? I have the Model Y. It's actually this model right here, the gray one. So let's say you want, you know, this is the one that's chosen. So I'm gonna actually grab this image here. I'm gonna pop it up here. Now in this case, the blend mode's probably not necessary because we have dark colors in the background, although we may change that, but I'm gonna go ahead and just switch this over to normal. And I'm going to adjust this mask, because up here we want to be able to see all of our car. There we go. Perfect. And maybe just to match, maybe this could be themed a little bit. So even though we're going for more of a dark mode in this particular application, I might want to change the background color of or the artboard. Maybe I can sample one of these grays here. It's a little bit too light, I think. Let's try a darker gray here. Ooh, that could work. So you're just kind of bringing in bits and pieces of that car as you're going through the experience. And then maybe you can just bring in the name as well. What is it, Apollo? Whoops, Apollo. It's an interesting name. And for here, we're going to change the color to white. Maybe we'll bump this up to heavy. Bump up the size a little bit. 18 could potentially work. I'm going to leave it here for now. It's not the... I don't know, it doesn't work completely, but it could work. And then one more thing I might want to add, if you remember, I think if I remember correctly, no, I am wrong. Oh yeah, settings icon was up here. So we're going to add that as well. We're going to add a settings icon right at the top. This one's going to be very simple. So I'm actually going to just hop over to Nucleo. It's a third-party icon manager, and type out something like gear, grab an icon, copy it, make sure I copy it, or I can just drag it directly into XD. Now, when you're designing for mobile devices like iOS, you want to keep in mind that the icons or the hotspot should be about 40 to 45 pixels. So right now, if you take a look, this icon is 25 pixels. Seems a little bit large still. So I'm going to just drop it down to about 20 pixels. But that's, of course, a lot smaller than 40, right? You also want to keep in mind that there is that notch at the top. So you probably don't want anything like right about here, right? So you want to keep that area nice and clean. So I can either put that there, or I can put that here. There's a lot of different areas you can put the settings icon. I don't love either of them, But what I was going back to what I was saying, this icon's fairly small. So what you'll want to do is, just grab a rectangle, make it about 40 pixels or so, place it into a group with that icon, and just reduce the opacity. That way, when you are handing this off to developers or users for testing, there's a nice big 40 pixel hotspot there that they definitely can't miss. Because when you do go into prototype mode, you can select this entire group, which will include that rectangle that we just created, which is great. All right, so now down below, we want to start adding in some of that content. And like I mentioned, a big focus of this application are those quick actions. And, we might want to add some quick actions up here. We might want to add a little bit of a, brief overview of your car's battery here. And then of course, a navigation bar at the bottom. So let's go ahead and start with the navigation bar, because I think that's super important to a mobile application. So I'm going to grab my rectangle, draw one out. Now I'm thinking for this one, we do have the guide set to 32 from this screen over here. I might want to drop them to about, let's try 24, just so we have a little bit extra room for that navigation bar. Even that might be a little bit too, let's try 16 actually. If we're sticking with that 8 pixel grid, which I know developers love these days. I'm going to round out the corners of this navigation, but there are so many different types of navigation bars that you can go with. You can go with straight edged ones. You can go ones that go all the way to, the edges here and then down here. Completely up to you. And then for the styling of this one, we're going to go somewhat dark. So let's go something like that. And then maybe we're going to add a little bit of color in there, just a tiny bit of color. And then I might want to add a border so it separates it from that dark background as well. So I always love to go pure white and then drag that down. And then maybe to add a little bit of a highlight, we can add an inner shadow as well. So we can add an inner shadow at the top. We definitely don't need any blur, so I'm going to drop that to 0. The Y value, let's start it at 2, but we don't want a dark inner shadow because that'll make it look like it has this weird depth going on. We just want a highlight. So in this case, we're going to go, let's add a little bit of a blue highlight up at the top here, right? Bump up the opacity. Something like that, just to give it a little bit. I don't know if I love it, but there we go. So you're noticing, there's a little bit of an extra highlight at the top of this shape, and just kind of looks interesting. And I'll definitely go back and experiment and tweak this a little bit later on. So now on this navigation bar, there are a few items we're going to be adding: a dashboard, shortcuts, schedule, and map. We are not going to be including the menu icon that was on the current design. I think it's not necessary. You can definitely fit the menu icon, either up here or somewhere else. But on the navigation bar, try to stick with the main functions of the application. So starting off with, let's start off with the icons that we're not going to be designing. Let's go for something like a grid. And for the secondary icons, I like going with line-based icons, especially on darker interfaces. So I'll drop this in size. I'm not sure exactly what size we're going to go with just yet. So we're going to go with that. And then maybe for schedule, time or clock, that one could work. And then we might want a map. All right, so we have our inactive icons, and I'm going to make sure that they all line up really nicely. And like I mentioned all the time, when you're designing zoomed in, definitely hit that preview button at the top. That way you can see how things are looking at a zoomed out view. Obviously those icons are not aligned yet, but I'm going to move this one over to the right. Let's go for 32 is not too bad. Let's get rid of that. Oops. Get rid of the decimals. Perfect. All right. And then maybe below these, we might also want to include maybe a text layer of what exactly these are. Now, superchargers may be a little bit too long in terms of, the word. And that's probably a little bit too heavy too. It's not bad, but it's too heavy. So I might just change this to map. And then this might be schedule. And then shortcuts, which I think is actually called quick actions, I think, in the app, possibly. Something like that. And I'm going to make sure to group these elements as well. Just selecting both of them and Command and Control G, actions and schedule and map. And then finally, we want one more icon. These icons might be a little bit too large, possibly, but we want one more icon, and that's going to be the active screen, which is going to be the dashboard. So I thought it would be kind of fun and cute to almost, recreate the Tesla screen that's in the Model 3 and the Model Y. So this might be dashboard, or maybe just dash. And then here, we'll just have a nice rectangle, something like that. And the border of this is going to be strictly a border. And then maybe we'll bump it up in size a little bit, round out the corners just a touch. 2 looks pretty good. All right. And then, on the actual screen, the UI, there's, definitely some certain interface or sections of this. So we kind of want to mimic that. So with the rectangle, I'm going to draw out the first section over here. 4, 4, and 4. That looks pretty good. And I'll round this out ever so slightly, about 1 pixel. And then on this side, make sure it's also 4. And at the bottom, there's that music bar down there. And then wrap it up with the main section. This is usually where the map is stored or displayed. This will be our screen. All right, that could work. It's definitely a bolder icon, right? But it is the home icon, is the active icon. So it should be a little bit bolder than the rest and a little bit more solid. And if you really want to emphasize what screen that the user is on, we can kind of start bringing in, our little highlight that we created. So if I dive in here and copy that, of course you can recreate one with a simple rectangle, but we can paste one here. And then maybe just kind of bring this in. It's an option. It could work, it could not work. It's a very bold choice, right? And you got to be careful with some of these bold choices, because sometimes they'll work, sometimes not so much. All right, so now I want to make sure that these are all centered and distributed from each other. So I'm going to make sure to, at the top right-hand corner, I can use the distribute horizontally option. Oops, there we go. And I'll just shift them up a little bit and make sure that they're centered. There we go. Perfect. So we now, whoops, I forgot to move this as well. So we now have our navigation bar in place. I'm going to make sure to select all the elements that make up this navigation bar, pop them into a group. And what we should ideally do is also put this into a component. That way, right over here, boop. That way, if you do use this navigation bar on multiple screens, which I would imagine in a situation like this, you absolutely would, then you can just go back to your main component, make one change, and it'll distribute those changes everywhere. All right, perfect. That looks pretty good. We could consider putting a little bit of a drop shadow underneath this shape as well, similar to what we did in the car example, right? Again, very subtle drop shadow, blur it quite a bit. It just helps kind of bring it up from the background, considering we have a dark navigation bar on a dark background. Sometimes a very subtle drop shadow helps. Sometimes it might be a little bit too much, but you know what? It looks pretty good. All right. Now, up here at the top, we may want to start bringing in some of those quick actions like I was talking about earlier. So I'm actually kind of digging this style of the navigation bar, so I'm actually going to copy this shape. And let's go ahead and paste it up here. Something like that. And inside here might be something like open trunk. And ideally, there'll probably be some icons and some additional visual elements. Maybe, there might be a menu icon at the top, or an icon to see more or edit or something like that. There could be a lot of different things that go along with this, but you got to think these things through, right? Action. And another thing you might want to think through in a situation like this, this isn't meant to be the quick actions screen, right? Where you manage all your actions and see all of your actions. It may be maybe your most commonly used actions. So do you display 2? Do you display 3? Do you display all of them? Do you display a button to go to the quick actions screen? Do you display them like this, where you can scroll to the right or the left and see additional ones? Or do you make sure that they are lined up perfectly? There's so much you have to think about as you're designing and figuring out the user experience. It just goes on and on, right? But that's kind of the fun in this industry, is figuring out how to solve all these challenges. All right, now this does feel a little bit too large, so I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller this way. Maybe I'll bring back the corners a touch to about 8 pixels. There we go, 16. I don't know. What do y'all think? I'm leaning towards no scrolling, just keep everything kind of contained. So in that case, what we can do, if we bring back our guides, is bring this over. And let's say we want 2 of them. We're going to divide by 2. And let's say -8 to give a... What did I do? What did I do? Oh, I divided. -8. There we go. And now we should be able to fit 2 of them quite nicely with 16 pixels in between. Of course, you can use a repeat grid, absolutely. Or you can use a stack, a lot of different things you can use. And this one over here, let's see, what other actions do we have? Open the front, close the port, turn on climate's good. Turn on climate. There we go. Gal says, I think scrolling today can be good, but depends, or maybe 2 buttons in one container. Yeah, there's so many different ways you can go about this. And then maybe right below here, we may want to continue with this style and maybe display a little bit of information about the car. So maybe this could be, the battery health of the car, for example. And we might want a little bit of an icon here. Round out the corners ever so slightly. Drop this. Maybe let's try ooh, that's not going to work. Let's add a little bit of color in there. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Color is fun, but it's also very challenging sometimes. Especially when you have 2 minutes left. Oh no. All right, let's find a battery icon, bring this in. Phew, that's a big button. I'd like a button to say stop climate change. Me too. That would be wonderful. Because I want my daughter and her children and their children to live happy lives without wearing these big masks to avoid smog and all that stuff. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. Battery health, and let's go ahead and left align it. Maybe we'll bring this down. Let's try 16. And then below here, we might want to put, let's say 50% charged. And maybe this will be, I don't know, medium. Let's bring this down to 12. That could work. All right, and I'm definitely zipping through this. Ideally, I would think things through a little bit better and space things out better, the whole 9 yards. And then maybe over to the right, we might want a very quick icon to see more information. Let's bump this up in size a touch, round out the caps possibly, or keep it straight edge, 2 times. And then maybe, I don't know, let's try this. And all right, that could work. I'm not loving this design. I think now looking at it, the shadows might be a little bit too harsh. It'll do, right? It's definitely good for a first step. And then once you get into that polish phase, that's where things really get exciting. So a big thank you to everyone who has tuned in today. I will be back next week with another XD Masterclass. Kyle T. Webster's coming up in just a few minutes, so stick around for that. And I will see you all next time.